What would you do if someone mocked you in another language, thinking you couldn't understand, only to discover you spoke it better than they did? Before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe to Echoes of Yesterday. We love hearing from you, so tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. The lights inside restaurant Celestine sparkled like diamond hanging from the ceiling. Every table was covered with white cloth, so clean it looked like fresh snow. Rich people sat everywhere, talking quietly, eating expensive food, and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. It was Thursday evening, and for Marcus Donovan, this wasn't just dinner. This was victory. Marcus was 42 years old, tall, and wore a suit that cost more money than most families earned in 6 months. His dark hair was combed back perfectly. His watch was so shiny it caught the light every time he moved his wrist. He owned companies. He bought and sold businesses like other people bought groceries. Tonight, he sat at the best table in the restaurant with 3 other people. His business partners, Tony and Derek, sat on either side of him. Across from him sat his girlfriend, Isabella, who wore a red dress and smiled even when she didn't want to. Tomorrow morning, everyone will read about us in the newspapers, Tony said, lifting his glass high in the air. Marcus smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. Newspapers? No, my friend. Tomorrow we become legends. By summer, we will control every delivery truck, every warehouse, and every shipping route in northern Italy. We will own it all. They laughed together, clinking their glasses. The sound echoed across the restaurant. It was a laugh of men who believed nothing could touch them. Men who thought money made them better than everyone else. The door to the kitchen swung open quietly. A young woman walked out carrying a silver tray with 4 glasses of red wine. She moved carefully, her step soft but sure. Her name was Sophia Loren. She was 26 years old, with light brown skin that glowed under the restaurant lights and eyes the color of warm honey. Her blonde hair was tied back in a neat ponytail. She wore the restaurant uniform, a black shirt, white apron, and a name tag that said simply Sophia. She looked calm on the outside, professional, polite, but if you looked closely at her eyes, you could see something else hiding there. Tiredness, sadness, and something stronger, something like a fire that refused to go out. Marcus barely looked at her as she approached. Finally, he muttered in Italian, not even trying to hide his rudeness. The wine. Isabella gave Sophia a small, apologetic smile, but Marcus didn't care about apologies. He enjoyed being harsh. It made him feel powerful. Pour it carefully, Marcus said, still speaking Italian. His voice was loud enough for the whole table to hear. That bottle costs more than you make in a month. Maybe 2 months, actually. Sophia paused for just a second. Her fingers tightened around the tray, but her face stayed calm. She said nothing. She simply began pouring the wine into each glass, her hands steady and controlled. Tony and Derek glanced at each other and grinned. They thought this was funny. They thought she couldn't understand. Marcus leaned toward Derek and spoke again in Italian, his voice dripping with cruelty. I swear, they hire anyone these days. She probably doesn't even know what kind of wine this is. Probably thinks it's grape juice. Derek laughed, covering his mouth with his hand. At least she's nice to look at. Add some color to the room. Their laughter was sharp and mean. It sliced through the air like broken glass. Sophia finished pouring the last glass. She stepped back, her head slightly bowed. Will there be anything else, sir? She asked in English. Her voice was soft but clear. Her accent was perfect, like someone who had studied languages for years. Marcus waved his hand at her like she was a fly buzzing around his head. No, no. Go away. Sophia turned and walked toward the kitchen. Each step felt heavier than the last. She kept her face blank, but inside, her heart was pounding. Her hands wanted to shake, but she wouldn't let them. She needed this job too badly. 3 months ago, Sophia's life had been completely different. She had been a student at Rome University, one of the best schools in Italy. She studied languages, not just Italian and English, but French, Arabic, and even some Japanese. She loved words. She loved how they connected people, how they built bridges between strangers. Her dream was to work for the United Nations one day, helping people from different countries talk to each other and solve problems together. Her mother, who was from Senegal, and her father, who was Italian, had always told her that education was a key to everything. So Sophia worked harder than anyone. She stayed up late reading. She wrote papers that professors called brilliant. She earned a full scholarship to study for her master's degree. Everything was going perfectly, until one terrible morning. She woke up and checked her email like always. There, sitting at the top of her inbox, was a message from the university. The subject line made her stomach drop. Academic misconduct investigation. Someone had accused her of cheating. They said she stole parts of her final thesis from another paper. The truth was, she had used that paper as a reference and listed it properly in her work, exactly like students are supposed to do. But someone had reported her anyway, claiming she copied it without permission. They also said she had bribed her way into the program, which was a complete lie. The real reason was uglier and simpler. Another student, a girl whose boyfriend had once asked Sophia on a date, was jealous. Sophia had said no to the boyfriend because she was focused on her studies. But the girl never forgave her. She sent an anonymous letter to the university, twisting the truth, planting lies. The university didn't investigate carefully. They didn't ask Sophia for her side of the story. They just suspended her immediately. Her scholarship was canceled. Her student housing was taken away. Within 1 week, her entire life fell apart. Sophia tried to fight back. She sent emails. She wrote letters. She begged professors to look at the evidence. Nobody listened. Rumors spread across campus faster than wildfire. People whispered behind her back. Some students who used to be her friends stopped talking to her. Then, while she was trying to clear her name, her mother had a stroke back home in Naples. Sophia dropped everything and took the train south to be with her. When she arrived at the hospital and saw her mother lying in that bed, tubes in her arms, barely able to speak, Sophia made a decision. She stopped fighting the university. Her mother needed her more. But hospital bills were expensive. Her mother needed medicine every single day. Sophia had no money left. Her savings were gone. She needed work, any work, immediately. That's how she ended up in Milan, 200 miles from home, working at Restaurant Celestine. The manager hired her because she spoke multiple languages and could serve the international guests. The pay was low. The hours were long. And men like Marcus treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was nothing. But Sophia endured it. Every insult, every rude comment, every time someone snapped their fingers at her like she was a dog. She endured it because every paycheck meant her mother could afford her medication for another week. Now, standing in front of Marcus's table again with her main course, Sophia reminded herself to stay calm. Just smile. Say nothing. Get through the night. But Marcus wasn't finished with her yet. "Hey, waitress," he called out in Italian, louder this time. Other tables were starting to look over. "What's your name?" Sophia stopped. She turned slowly, her tray balanced perfectly in her hands. "Sophia, so." Marcus grinned. "Sophia, pretty name for a pretty girl." He said it like it was a compliment, but his tone made it sound like an insult. "Tell me, Sophia, where are you from? You don't look Italian." Derek snickered. Tony looked away, uncomfortable but silent. Isabella touched Marcus's arm. "Marcus, maybe we should just—" "I'm asking her a question," Marcus interrupted, his eyes still locked on Sophia. "It's rude not to answer questions, isn't it, Sophia?" Sophia felt something hot rising in her chest, something that had been building for 3 months. Every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment she had swallowed her pride was gathering inside her like a storm. But she kept her voice steady. "My mother is from Senegal. My father is Italian. I was born in Naples." Marcus nodded slowly, mockingly. "Ah, Naples. That explains it." He switched back to Italian, speaking to his partners. "Mixed blood. You can always tell. They try to fit in, but they never quite belong anywhere, do they?" The words hung in the air like poison, and something inside Sophia snapped. For 3 months, Sophia had been silent. For 3 months, she had swallowed insults like bitter medicine. For 3 months, she had told herself that keeping quiet was the same as being strong. But standing there, listening to Marcus talk about her like she was less than human, she realized something important. Silence wasn't strength. Sometimes, silence was just fear wearing a mask. She set down her tray on the nearest empty table. The sound made everyone at Marcus's table look up. Sophia turned to face them fully, her shoulders straight, her chin raised. When she spoke, her voice was different. It wasn't the soft, polite voice of a waitress anymore. It was clear and strong and completely unafraid. And she spoke in perfect Italian. "Actually, sir, I belong exactly where I choose to belong," Sophia said. Her Italian was flawless, better than Marcus's, with a refined accent of someone who had studied the language deeply. "And right now, I choose to stand here and tell you that every word you said tonight I understood perfectly." The shock on Marcus's face was instant. His mouth fell open slightly. The wine glass in his hand froze halfway to his lips. Tony and Derek both went pale, their eyes wide with horror as they realized what had just happened. Isabella covered her mouth with her hand, but Sophia could see something else in her eyes. Relief, maybe even respect. "You understood." Marcus stammered, trying to recover his composure. "You speak Italian." "I speak 5 languages fluently," Sophia replied, her voice steady as stone. "Italian, English, French, Arabic, and Japanese. I was 2 months away from completing my master's degree in comparative linguistics at Rome University before my life was destroyed by lies. So, yes, Mr. Donovan, I understood every single insult you threw at me tonight." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners had stopped eating. Forks hung in midday. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone was watching now. Marcus's face turned red. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "How dare you speak to me like this? Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Sophia said. "You're a man who believes money gives him the right to treat other human beings like trash. You're someone who thinks speaking another language gives you permission to be cruel, as long as your victim doesn't understand. But I did understand, sir. I understood every word." She took a step closer to the table. Her voice grew stronger with each sentence. "You said this wine cost more than my salary. You're right. It does. But do you know what that wine really costs? It costs the dignity you just threw away. It costs the respect you'll never get back. Because money can buy expensive bottles and fancy suits and tables at exclusive restaurants, but it cannot buy you class. It cannot buy you kindness. And it certainly cannot buy you the right to degrade another person." Derek tried to interrupt. "Listen, we were just joking around. We didn't mean." "You didn't mean for me to understand," Sophia cut him off, her eyes flashing. "That's not the same as not meaning it. You meant every word. You just didn't expect consequences." An elderly couple at the next table started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. A woman across the room joined them. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, half the restaurant was applauding. Marcus looked around, his face growing redder. "This is ridiculous. I'm a customer here. I demand you call your manager." "Call him yourself," Sophia said calmly. "I'm sure he'll be interested to hear how you've been treating his staff. And I'm sure the other guests here would love to share what they witnessed." Several people nodded. A man in a gray suit stood up. "I heard everything he said," the man announced loudly. "It was disgusting. Absolutely disgusting." A woman in pearls added, "He should be ashamed of himself." Isabella stood up suddenly, grabbing her purse. "I'm leaving, Marcus." Her voice was shaking, but firm. "I've watched you treat people terribly for 2 years, and I've said nothing. I told myself you were just stressed, just ambitious, just confident. But you're not. You're cruel, and I won't be part of it anymore." She walked past Sophia and paused. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have said something sooner." Then she walked out of the restaurant, her red dress disappearing through the door. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane. You're all insane." He pointed at Sophia. "You just lost your job. I'll make sure you never work in the city again." But Sophia didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eye. "You can't take from me what I was already prepared to lose. I came here tonight ready to stay silent, ready to endure whatever you threw at me, because I needed this job to help my mother. But you know what I realized? My mother didn't raise me to accept cruelty. She raised me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The manager finally appeared, rushing from the kitchen. His name was Mr. Benedetti, a short man with kind eyes and graying hair. He looked confused, glancing between Marcus and Sophia. "What's going on here?" he asked. Before Marcus could speak, the man in the gray suit stepped forward. "I'll tell you what's going on. This gentleman has spent the entire evening insulting your waitress in Italian, assuming she couldn't understand. He called her uneducated, made racist comments about her heritage, and treated her like she was worthless. She just revealed that she speaks perfect Italian and has a master's degree. Frankly, she showed more grace and intelligence in 5 minutes than is shown all night." Other diners murmured in agreement. Mr. Benedetti's face darkened. He turned to Marcus. "Is this true?" Marcus sputtered. "I'm one of your best customers. I bring important people here. I spend thousands." "Answer the question," Mr. Benedetti said quietly. "Is it true?" Marcus's silence was answer enough. Mr. Benedetti nodded slowly. "Then I'm afraid I have to ask you to leave. Immediately." "You're kicking me out." Marcus couldn't believe it. "For her?" "No," Mr. Benedetti said firmly. "I'm asking you to leave because you violated the basic principle of human decency. Money doesn't buy you the right to abuse people. Not in my restaurant." Tony and Derek stood up quickly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. They mumbled apologies and headed for the door. Marcus stood alone, his face a mixture of rage and humiliation. He looked around the restaurant at all the people staring at him with disgust and disappointment. Finally, he threw his napkin on the table and stormed toward the exit. But before he reached the door, he turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he said, pointing at Sophia. She smiled sadly. "Yes, Mr. Donovan, it is." He left, and the heavy door swung shut behind him. The restaurant erupted in applause again, louder this time. People stood up. Some came over to shake Sophia's hand. The elderly couple invited her to join them for dessert. The woman in pearls hugged her. But Sophia felt tears building behind her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of release. For 3 months, she had carried the weight of silence. Now it was gone. Mr. Benedetti put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sophia, take the rest of the night off. With pay." She nodded, unable to speak. As she walked toward the back room to collect her things, she pulled out her phone. She needed to call her mother. She needed to tell her that today, finally, she had found her voice again, and it had been worth it. The back room of Restaurant Celestine was small and quiet, a sharp contrast to the noise and energy of the dining area. Sophia sat on a wooden chair, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She had done it. She had actually done it. She had spoken up, defended herself, and survived. But now what? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw Mr. Benedetti's name on the screen. Her heart sank. This was it. He was probably calling to fire her properly, away from all the witnesses. She answered with a trembling voice. "Hello. Sophia, can you come to my office, please?" Mr. Benedetti's voice was calm, giving nothing away. "Yes, sir." She walked down the narrow hallway to his office, each step feeling like it took forever. When she knocked on the door, he called her in immediately. Inside, she found him sitting behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. The man in the gray suit from the restaurant was there too, standing by the window. Sophia froze. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a guest. I can come back." No, please sit," Mr. Benedetti said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Sophia, this is Professor Alberto Marchesi. He has something to tell you." The man in the gray suit stepped forward, and Sophia's heart nearly stopped. She recognized that name. Professor Marchesi was famous in academic circles. He was the head of the linguistic department at Milan University, one of the most respected scholars in all of Europe. "Miss Lauron," Professor Marchesi said gently, "I must confess something. I was at that restaurant tonight specifically to meet with Mr. Benedetti about hiring multilingual staff for a university event. But I witnessed everything that happened at that table." Sophia felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. A distinguished professor had watched her lose her temper, had seen her confront a customer, had witnessed a moment of breakdown. "I'm so sorry you had to see that," she whispered. "It was unprofessional. I shouldn't have." Professor Marquisi held up his hand, stopping her. "Please, let me finish. What I saw tonight was not unprofessional. What I saw was a young woman with exceptional language skills, extraordinary composure, and remarkable courage standing up against injustice. Your Italian was flawless. By the way, better than many native speakers I know." Sophia blinked, confused. "I don't understand." "I made some phone calls after you left the dining room," the professor continued. "I called Rome University. I spoke to the dean directly. I asked about your case, about the accusations of academic misconduct." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "The dean was quite embarrassed," Professor Marquisi said. "Apparently, 2 weeks ago, the student who accused you came forward and confessed. She admitted she fabricated the entire story out of jealousy. The university has been trying to contact you to reinstate your scholarship and clear your name, but you had changed your phone number and moved away." The room started spinning. Sophia gripped the arms of her chair to steady herself. "What?" "Your name has been cleared," Mr. Benedetti said softly. "You were innocent all along." Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks before she could stop them. 3 months of shame. 3 months of believing she had lost everything. 3 months of carrying the weight of false accusations. And it was all gone. Just like that. "There's more?" Professor Marquisi said. "I would like to offer you a full scholarship to Milan University to complete your master's degree. We have an excellent linguistics program, and after what I witnessed tonight, I believe you would be a tremendous asset to our department." Sophia couldn't speak. She could only cry, covering her face with her hands. Mr. Benedetti came around his desk and handed her a tissue. "You'll always have a job here if you need one, Sophia, but I think you belong somewhere bigger than this restaurant." "I don't know what to say," Sophia managed through her tears. Thank you so much." Professor Marquisi smiled. "There's one more thing. That man tonight, Marcus Donovan. The story of what happened is already spreading. Someone recorded part of the confrontation on their phone. It's all over social media now. Millions of people have seen it." Sophia's eyes widened. "Millions?" "You become something of a hero," the professor said. "People are calling you brave. They are sharing their own stories of being mistreated and finding the courage to speak up. You've inspired a lot of people tonight, Miss Laurent." Over the next few days, Sophia watched in amazement as her story spread across the world. News websites wrote articles about her. Television programs invited her for interviews. Strangers sent her messages of support from dozens of countries. But the most surprising thing came 3 days later. She received an email from Isabella, Marcus's former girlfriend. The email was short but powerful. Isabella explained that watching Sophia stand up to Marcus had given her the courage to finally leave him. She had been making excuses for his behavior for years, telling herself he would change, that his cruelty was just stress. But seeing him attack Sophia so viciously, and seeing Sophia defend herself so brilliantly, had opened her eyes. "You showed me what real strength looks like," Isabella wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. You saved me too." Marcus Donovan, meanwhile, faced his own consequences. His business partners quietly removed him from the company leadership. Several of his major clients ended their contracts, saying they didn't want to be associated with someone who treated people so poorly. The newspapers that were supposed to celebrate his business triumph instead ran stories about his disgraceful behavior at the restaurant. Money, it turned out, couldn't protect him from the truth. 1 month later, Sophia walked through the gates of Milan University as a student once again. She carried her books under her arm and wore a smile that reached her eyes. Her mother had recovered enough to video call her every evening, and each time they talked, her mother said the same thing. "I'm so proud of you, my daughter, not because you went back to school, but because you remembered who you are." Sophia's first class was advanced linguistic theory. As she sat in the lecture hall, surrounded by other students, she thought about that night at Restaurant Celestine. She thought about how close she had come to staying silent forever, to accepting cruelty as the price of survival. But she had learned something important. Dignity isn't something other people give you. It's something you carry inside yourself. And no amount of money, no position of power, no expensive suit or shiny watch can take it away unless you let them. After class, Professor Marcus asked her to stay behind. "Sophia, I have a proposition for you," he said. "The United Nations is looking for interpreters for their youth conference next spring. I recommended you. They want to interview you next month." Sophia felt her heart leap. The United Nations. Her dream. The goal she thought she had lost forever. "I don't know what to say, Professor." "Say yes," he replied with a warm smile. "The world needs people like you. People who understand that words have power, that languages build bridges, and that standing up for what's right matters more than staying comfortable." Sophia nodded, tears of joy filling her eyes. Yes, absolutely yes. That evening, she returned to her small apartment and called her mother. "Mama, you won't believe what happened today," she began. As she told her mother about the UN opportunity, about her classes, about her new beginning, Sophia looked out her window at the Milan skyline. The city lights sparkled like the chandeliers at Restaurant Celestine, but they felt different now. They felt like possibility instead of oppression. She thought about Marcus Donovan and wondered if he had learned anything from that night. She hoped he had. She hoped he understood now that every person he meets carries a story, carries dreams, carries dignity that deserves respect. But whether he learned or not wasn't her responsibility. She had done her part. She had spoken her truth. She had stood up not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been dismissed, insulted, or treated as less than human. The video of that night was still circulating online. Sophia read some of the comments sometimes. People from all over the world shared how her story had inspired them to speak up in their own lives. A teenager in Brazil stood up to a bully. A woman in Japan quit her job where her boss belittled her daily. A man in Canada reported discrimination at his workplace. One comment stayed with Sophia forever. It was from a young girl who wrote, "I used to think being quiet made me strong. But you taught me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is use your voice. Thank you for showing me that speaking up isn't rude. It's necessary." That's what Sophia wanted people to understand. Kindness is important. Politeness has its place. But neither kindness nor politeness should ever mean accepting cruelty. There is a difference between being respectful and being silent in the face of injustice. As the weeks turned into months, Sophia threw herself into her studies. She excelled in every class. She made new friends who valued her for who she was, not what she could serve them. She visited her mother every weekend, and each visit her mother grew a little stronger. And every single day, Sophia remembered that night at Restaurant Celestine, not with anger or bitterness, but with gratitude, because that night had taught her the most important lesson of all. You cannot control how other people treat you. You cannot force them to see your worth or respect your dignity, but you can control how you respond. You can choose to stay silent, or you can choose to speak. You can accept their definition of who you are, or you can stand firm in your own truth. Marcus Donovan had tried to make her feel small, worthless, invisible. But in doing so, he had accidentally given her a gift. He had pushed her to the point where she had to choose between her silence and her soul. And she had chosen her soul. That choice changed everything. Years from now, when Sophia would work at the United Nations, translating conversations between world leaders, helping nations understand each other, building those bridges she had always dreamed of building, she would sometimes think back to that Thursday night in Milan. She would remember the weight of the tray in her hands, the sting of cool words, the moment she decided enough was enough. And she would smile, knowing that every important journey begins with a single moment of courage. The moment when you decide that you matter. The moment when you find your voice. The moment when you choose dignity over silence. That's the moment everything changes. And for Sophia Loren, that moment happened in a restaurant filled with crystal glasses and cruel laughter, when a man who thought he was better than everyone else learned the hardest lesson of his life. That respect isn't bought. It's earned. And every human being, regardless of their job, their background, or the color of their skin, deserves to be treated with dignity. This is a lesson the world learned from one brave waitress who refused to stay silent. This is the lesson we should all remember. Because somewhere, right now, someone is being treated unfairly. Someone is being insulted, dismissed, or degraded. And maybe, just maybe, they need to hear Sophia's story. They need to know that speaking up is not only okay, it's necessary. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. You matter. Never forget that. And never let anyone convince you otherwise.